Go ahead. I'll go
All
after.
right. I'm going to share my screen. First and foremost, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm happy to talk about the program today. I'm going to be talking specifically about the NSF SBIR program, with the understanding that there are a number of other government agencies. I think there are 11 in total that have an SBIR program. But I'm really going to be focusing on NSF. So SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, STTR, Small Business Tech Transfer. First and foremost, why is this important? Why does this matter? How has this program had an impact? There are many companies that have been funded, have significant impacts on society and have had commercial success. Societal benefit is one of the review criteria that we use. Hopefully this isn't blocking your way. I apologize if it was. In the evaluation of proposals. And I'm going to give some examples of companies that have been funded by the program and where they are. This is just a blanket thing, just kind of little news headlines. And you could see we've got climate tech, electric vehicle batteries, robotics, quantum, food alternatives. And these are just some examples of companies that have been, funded by the program, receive follow-on funding, and the impact that they're trying to make on society. I'm going to give some specific examples. First one here is I'll hand it off to Ben to chat about Carbice.
Thanks, Eric. And just first of all, let me just say hi. I'm Ben Schrag. I'm a program director here at the NSF, and been in NSF for 15 years almost, I guess, 14 and a half. And prior to that was at a semiconductor diagnostic startup for 7 years and was funded by this program when we got started. So Carbice is one of many companies in our portfolio. I think they're now graduated, but we have several hundred companies we're supporting at any given time. And so Carbice is a company spun out of a faculty member's lab. His name is Baratunde Kola. He's at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and he works on new materials, specifically kind of novel forms of carbon to basically create a better way to dissipate heat. All of you probably know that one of the biggest limitations to computing and to chips in your phones and things is basically power and the ability to get rid of the heat. You've probably felt your phone heat up when you're using it a lot. It's a big problem to make computers more powerful, phones, everything like that. So these guys have a way to basically do what's called thermal management of cell phones and space, circuits that go into space, all kinds of things to basically make them more cooler and therefore better. So this technology was originally in a research lab at Georgia Tech. Baratunde eventually realized that it could actually be something that could become a product that people would use. And so this whole journey started with basic research and then came to funding through our program. And this company had kind of a pathway, which is kind of typical of the companies that we fund. You'll notice it's been 8 years and they're still going. So our companies do take a long time to get to success because they have these kind of thorny technical problems. But along the way, as you'll see here, they've been raising support from us and then from investors. They have been engaging with their customers, kind of locking in partnerships, scaling their funding, scaling their team, and now they've got a fairly significant team in a new dedicated facility in Atlanta, and they're serving a number of customers, including things that are actually in space. And so this is kind of the type of success story we're looking for. We're looking for this innovative new technology that allows companies to basically create a product that is especially attractive and disruptive for their customers. Create that value and then make the company grow because they're selling their product and getting it out into the hands of the world. So if you're interested, there's a little more detail on Carbice at the link here. If you can take a picture or maybe search it on the web, you'll find that link. It gives a little more of the story behind Carbice, but it was a really cool team that we funded several years ago.
Thanks, Ben. And I guess I did jump into things a little bit without introducing myself very much as well. I'm Eric Piersdorf. I'm also a program director at NSF. I manage the biological technologies and pharmaceutical technologies. I was an entrepreneur. I also received an NSF SBIR, just like Ben did, as well as from some other government agencies as well. So I've been on the other side of the table, so I'm familiar with what that's like. And I'm going to jump right back into the program here. Another example of a success story that is similar to what Ben was talking about is Ginkgo Bioworks. Many of you may have heard of them. This is one of the companies at the forefront of synthetic biology. So for those of you who don't know what synthetic biology is, it's really manipulating microorganisms to produce high value compounds, chemicals, that kind of thing. in a efficient and hopefully eco-friendly way. So instead of having to use chemical processes that have a lot of waste, solvents, that kind of thing, you can re-engineer a microorganism to in the metabolic pathways therein to produce some compounds, materials, hopefully cheaply and at scale. This is a company that received their first SBIR in 2009. As you could see, as Ben mentioned, this is, these companies have been around for a while, a lot of them, before they get to some of their success stories. A lot of difficult research questions to still answer at the early stage. But we hope that we see these types of success stories where they're able to de-risk those technologies and get them out the door. And as you could see, in 2021, the company went public, and they currently have a market cap of $4.4 billion. So this is an example of a company that could have impact lots of different areas of society, from environmental, food security, chemistry, production of different therapeutics. There's lots of different applications for synthetic biology. An example that's a little bit closer to home, this is Ingadigen. This is a North Carolina company that's focusing on developing allergen-free peanuts. So as I'm sure many of you know, peanut allergy can be extremely severe, where people who are suffering from it can go through anaphylactic shocks, and many of them can die. Most people, they just do what they can to avoid consuming peanuts, and that can be very difficult, especially if you're going out to eat. You may not realize that there are peanuts in certain different foods. And so the goal of this project is to manipulate the chromosomes or the genetic material of peanuts to knock out the different genes that cause the production of allergens. So you see the team here. There's just some of the some nice illustrations of the technologies that they've used. Currently using CRISPR. Many of you may have heard that. It's been a buzzword. A recent Nobel Prize was awarded to the people who found and developed CRISPR. They received their first NSF Phase 1 2017, and they're currently in the midst of a Phase 2. So this is a little bit early on. They're developing well, but I wanted to give you an example of a company that's doing well, that's close to home in North Carolina. I'm going to talk now about what the program is. So many of you may not have heard of SBIR program. It's managed by SBA. As I mentioned, there are I think 11 government agencies that have SBIR programs. It's a way to get funding for your company that the funder doesn't take a piece of the money, of the pie. So it's non-dilutive. NSF in particular, we have about $230 million. Focuses on translating these deep technology innovations, which could have commercial impact. It's created by program directors like Ben and myself, who have come from the background of working with small businesses, investment, funding, fundraising, that kind of thing, that have that perspective of what it is to start a company, and what hopefully is we can provide some advice to companies, so we can give them, as I like to say, they don't make the same mistakes that I made with my companies. We give grants and cooperative agreements. Again, this is non-dilutive. NSF does not retain any ownership of the IP, intellectual property, or anything along those lines. And when you combine Phase 1 and Phase 2 grants, there's different phases. Phase 1 is a little smaller. Phase 2 is a little bit bigger. The total amount of funding can be up about $2 million over the duration of your award. I like to provide some of these statistics. We focus on startups. As I mentioned, this whole program is for SBIRs is managed by SBA, and small business is defined as a company that has 500 or fewer employees. So you could see where NSF's wheelhouse is. It's a little bit earlier than that, a little bit smaller than that. So 90% of the awardees have 10 or fewer employees. 90% of the awardees have never had an SBIR Phase 2 from any agency, not just NSF, any agency that participates in the program. 80% of the awardees were incorporated, or companies that were incorporated in the past 5 years. So these are young companies, still have a lot of development to do with their technology, and probably have a long ways to go until they have something which is a commercial product. And the majority of Phase 1 NSF SBIR awards are first-time submitters. So I know a lot of people are often concerned where I've not done this before, I've not gone through this process. The majority of people who have been awarded by NSF are first timers, and they had not gone through that process. Many of them in the past as well. Are you a good fit? So this gets down into the nitty gritty of what NSF is looking for, and the niche that NSF has really carved out for the program. Do you need to do significant technical R&D? So if you've already developed everything, you just need to tweak it or modify it a little bit. that might not be a great fit for the NSF program. NSF is looking for technologies that are unproven and that have or could create a new product or service. Do you have a unique and defensible technical innovation? So how do you protect what you're going to be doing? How are you going to prevent competitors from doing what you're doing, and get something which can be protected and marketed and have a good product? Are you structured for aggressive commercialization? NSF is looking for fast-moving companies, not necessarily lifestyle companies that just get funding to keep on going. We want them to move and migrate and move forward to get a commercial product out there, or at least move towards that commercial product. And do you have a significant understanding of the market and customer? Seeing that there's an unmet need, and this goes into looking at the landscape of the competitors and what your advantage may be. You may not be as savvy with phase one, but you should have an idea of where your technology could fit and where those opportunities are. Phase one awardees are often are given an opportunity to do a significant amount of customer discovery to really refine that market opportunity as well. But even going into an application, you want to have an idea of what opportunities may be out there. Things not to worry about. And we get a lot of emails about this. It doesn't fit into a topic that I see on your website. Don't worry about it. NSF funds basically all areas of science and engineering. So even if there's not a topic there, it fits into the program. It's a project of NSF, of interest to NSF. NSF doesn't ever buy a technology that it funds from SBIR. So unlike other government agencies where its mission is to actually fund companies so they can later on buy that, and they can have an interest in a specific way that something is being developed, NSF doesn't have that. So it's application agnostic, but the review criteria, as I mentioned, one of which is societal benefit. How is this going to benefit society? This can manifest in a lot of ways. The intellectual merit, how interesting is that technology and the commercial potential? What is that market out there? So anything that hits those review criteria would be of interest to NSF. A lot of people worry about the budget. Don't worry about that too much. We have an opportunity to revisit the budget if your proposal is being considered for funding. Just try to put resource allocation to accomplish the technical objectives which are outlined. My company has never submitted a grant proposal before. I think I touched upon this a lot. Over 50% of our awardees have never applied to NSF before. And what if I make some minor administrative error? We'll have a chance to go through and fix most of those through a compliance check after you submit your proposal. And my lead investigator doesn't have a PhD or an academic connection or a long list of publications. This is a concern for a lot of people. We have tons of awardees that aren't affiliated with academia. So if you're not a spin out from a university, don't sweat it. That's not a problem. I've funded numerous PIs that don't have PhDs or even masters. Some don't have an undergraduate degree that have been funded in the program as well. That's not a requisite to serve as a PI. You just want to show that you have the technical ability to achieve the aims that are the objective of your work. And what's next? Oh, the process. Yes. So there is a process to apply, as I'm sure you all can imagine. It's a stepwise process where you need to have one thing before you move on to the next. So the first step is what's called the project pitch, and I'll touch upon that in just a minute. If you are invited to submit your full proposal, then you'll have a year to do so after your pitch is invited. And then you'll go through all the different steps of that. I'm not going to walk through all that now because I'm sure that's not really what a lot of people are that interested in. But this kind of outlines the entire process. You submit a pitch, then you submit your full proposal. After about 6 months, you'll hear back about the decision on that proposal. Oh, and there are a number of registrations that you'll need to have in place as well. But again, we'll walk you through that once a project pitch is invited. So what is the pitch? It's unlike what you hear for pitching to investors. You're not going to be getting up in front of us and presenting. It's actually a web form that you fill out. There's 4 different boxes. You talk about the team, the opportunity, your technology under development, and how you're going to be addressing some of the technical challenges in that project. So it's basically, like it says, three pages on a web form. Program director will respond generally in fewer than 4 weeks. Average time is about a week or 2. Project pitches can be submitted at any time. There's no deadlines. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. You could submit a project pitch. If invited, your full proposals will have a 12 months to apply to apply for and submit your full proposal. Current windows, one just passed in the beginning of July, so I apologize for leaving that one in there. But the next one is going to be in November of 2023. But you can submit at any time during that submission window. Some key information in the project pitch, as I mentioned, the technical innovation, what would be the focus of that project if you were invited to submit? And then you have, what are you going to do in your phase 1 work? How are you going to tackle that? What's your approach that you're going to use to tackle that problem? Then you talk about the customer profile and some pain points. And then finally, you talk about your team composition, your company, that kind of thing. Sometimes when you submit a pitch, you don't have a company formed. That's okay. You don't need to have a company formed when you submit a pitch. This is basically an idea. Does that idea fit for the program? We're only looking for programmatic fit. We're not going to be evaluating your technology or anything along those lines. Just really about, as I mentioned, that very early stage, high risk technology. And that stage is what we're looking for. So sometimes people will submit as an individual. And then, once they're invited, then they'll form a company to go through all the registrations that they'll need to submit your full proposal. So if you're considering, applying to the program, you don't need to have your company formed ahead of time. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you. I want to leave it open to questions and answers. Ben and I were happy to answer any questions that you may have. I don't know if we want to do it in the chat or if we're going to let people just raise their hand and call out. But here's my contact information and Ben's as well as the SBIR at nsf.gov. As well as our website, seedfund.nsf.gov. It's got a lot of great information about the process, some resources for you, as well as some information about other awardees, and so you can see what type of projects that have been put out there. And Henry, I'll hand it off to you now.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Are you able to take a look at the chat at all? Yeah. So. I do believe that there was a question asked about the November deadline. And is that for the pitch or is that for the full proposal?
That is for the full proposal. And I realize I don't actually see the chat. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that is for full proposals. You can submit a pitch at any time. The web portal is open. You can go to the seedfund.nsf.gov website and then go to how to apply, and they'll lead you down the steps and they'll give you a link to that project pitch. Once your pitch is invited, there are submission windows to submit your full proposal. And so the next window will close at the end of November.
Yes, so we have another question here. Can a postdoc be a co-PI? One second here. Let me just see if I can pull this up. I want to make sure that I get it. Bear with me a sec. Yeah. So can a postdoc be a co-PI on a project with another associate professor of a university?
It's a very good question. And so this is where there are some distinctions between SBIR and STTR. So SBIR does not allow any co-PIs. And the PI on the submission has to be employed by the company. And what that means is that they must be employed 51% of the time, meaning they can't work 19.6 hours or more for another employer. So a postdoc, for instance, couldn't be a PI if they're still a postdoc at university. If they're working full time. If they're working less than 50%, no more than 19.6 hours, then they could potentially serve as a PI on the award. Now, if there is an STTR requires a partner for a research institute. This could be a nonprofit research institute. It could be a university, for instance. There would be a co-PI, which is the PI on the sub-award. And that could be an academic. But there are some limitations and some rules and regulations about who can serve as a co-PI. For instance, a company owner couldn't be paid through a sub-award. So if the academic is a company founder who owns part of it, they couldn't get any salary through the sub-award.
Gotcha.
Can I chime in there real quick as well, Henry, for a second? Just because the term postdoc can be interpreted narrowly as someone who's still in academia, but obviously you could also say, okay, a postdoc is anyone who got their PhD recently. And I will say, and that's by that second definition, many of our PIs are people who graduated recently. That's probably the most common. There's not one way to do this, but Eric and I both had that experience as first-time founders. I think right at a grad school, being the lead of a company, basically, or at least the PI of a project. So in that sense, the person who just graduated could be the PI, but again, they'd have to be an employee of the company, not still in the employ of the university. And certainly when that happens, a lot of times, if their technology comes from that research they were doing as a student, many times the academic group they spun out of will have some role, but as Eric mentioned, there are certain rules. We want that person who's in the company with both feet to really lead the show here, and so we try to structure the awards accordingly.
Got you. For those who aren't familiar with the acronym, explain what a PI is.
Oh, absolutely. A PI stands for Principal Investigator. So they're the person who the award is actually given to the company, and they'll run and manage that award. That means they'll oversee all the technical work, all the personnel that are working on the project, manage the funds, obviously with some collaborations, but they're the ones who are responsible for all those aspects of it.
Gotcha. I have a question for you. There was mention made in one of your slides about qualifications, and one of the things, I think it was the first bullet point, was regarding significant research that needs to be done. That is a qualifier. In other words, you don't have to have, if I heard you correctly, you do not have to have had done significant research, but rather that research needs to be done, and that this award will be helpful in that regard. If you've already done a fair or sufficient research, then this is not necessarily the grant for you. Is that right?
That's a great question because there's nuance. Ben, I saw you unmute. You want to have a first crack at that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the best way to interpret that requirement is not what's been done, but what's left to do, Henry. And so different technologies take different amounts of time to prove out. We don't necessarily care as much whether you've done 1 year prior or 6 years or 10 years. What matters is that there still remain pretty significant technical risks, ideally at least one existential show-stopping risk left before the product can be said to be proven out for entry into the market. And that's obviously why our funding is needed. If you don't have that, our funding is not as relevant, because we have one tool in our toolbox, which is R&D funding. And if your company has already kind of gotten past the place where they know kind of what the product does and it's proven, then that's not R&D that you're doing anymore at that case. So yeah, so I think it's looking forward and understanding what's next is the best way to understand whether you're a good fit for our program. And I don't know, Eric, you're welcome to clarify.
No, I agree with everything that you said. I was going to just clarify or mention a couple things. First is that, sorry about that. I just need some lights about the thunder here, so hopefully we don't get cut off. First of which is making a distinction between fundamental research and translational research. And these grants or awards aren't for fundamental research, so they need to be translational, things that are building towards an actual product is first and foremost. And the second thing, where it says you need significant technical R&D, you don't need to have preliminary data, but what you're doing needs to be based on scientific knowledge and know-how. It needs to be something in the literature if you don't have preliminary data. I like to say you don't want to describe a bicycle to fly to the moon, because that you probably don't have preliminary data on that, and my guess is that doesn't exist in the literature as well. Though I understand that the Wright brothers were bicycle makers before they made an airplane, so that that doesn't always work really great as an analogy anymore. But those are the only two additions I'd add to that.
Gotcha. And when it comes to research, we're talking about research that proves out the capability of the product and/or service that you're developing, not customer discovery, right?
That is correct. These are R&D awards, and so everything on there should be to support the technical development of whatever's going on. There is an opportunity for customer discovery for awardees through an NSF-sponsored program is currently called the Beat the Odds Bootcamp. But no other customer discovery could be funded with direct cost at the time. That's how it currently is set up.
Gotcha. You've mentioned that with this pitch is fairly short. I think you said about 3 or 4 pages. Can you describe some of the components of that? And obviously, for those that are interested in moving forward with this, they'll go to the website and see the form themselves. But can you just kind of walk us briefly through what one would be expected to include in that pitch?
Absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen again here. Hopefully everyone could see this. So these are the components of the technical pitch. There's 4 basic text boxes that you fill out. I think each one has a limit of 500 words. And in that, you're going to talk about what your new innovation is. What is your technology? What is this thing that we should be so excited about? You're going to want to describe what it is, its novelty. And then, phase 1 R&D work. This goes to what Ben was saying about what are the technical challenges. What is the remaining work that needs to be done, to address some of these high risk aspects of the project. So you want to talk about how you plan to tackle some of those remaining technical tasks and technical development. Then you want to say, okay, I have this great technology, but who cares? You don't understand if there's a market for it. So what is the opportunity? Who are the customers? Who do you think is interested in this? Is it food security? Is it, aerospace? What is it? There could be lots of different applications. You want to talk about that in there. And then the team. Who are you? What is your background? Why does it make you think? Why should we think that you have the capabilities to develop this technology? And sometimes it could be a one person team. That's pretty normal. But you may have advisors that you want to talk about as well in that case, or collaborators, or something along those lines. Hope that helps.
Yeah.
Henry, I'm not sure. I got a question. I think it might just be to me, so I just wanted to flesh that out in case you hadn't seen it. I'm not sure who the chat's going to, but it was basically the question was about clarifying whether, as a founder of a tech company, they can apply for the program without collaborating with the research university. And the answer to that is yes, you can. And again, I just want to mention, because this term tech company is obviously everywhere out there in the world, and I think one of the most important things for folks who are new to the program to understand is, Eric just talked about that kind of core innovation. When we say the word tech in tech company, we have a little different meaning. I mean, to some extent in Silicon Valley, if you say tech company, it means anybody whose product is associated with software, right? I mean, to some extent. When we think about technology, we think about the kind of, if you want to go back to the Latin and Greek definition, which is basically the application of new knowledge. And so our version of the tech universe that we're willing to fund is a much more narrow universe than what I would say is the Silicon Valley tech universe, because there's a lot of great companies in Silicon Valley that don't have the level of technical innovation and risk that we demand. And so I think the important thing to this question that I got is, it doesn't matter that you're collaborating with a research university, but you have to have under the hood of your company this disruptively interesting, different, hard to predict way of doing things. The nail hitting is obviously important, but the most important thing for a fit with a program is that the hammer you're using to hit the nail is a unique hammer that no one else has done and probably no one else could do. That's kind of the most, I think, misunderstood point of our program, Eric, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
So you definitely don't have to collaborate with the research university, but you have to be a certain kind of tech company to be a good fit.
Right. And if I understand correctly, especially as it relates to the SBIR and perhaps STTR as well, because there are affiliations with other governmental agencies. Oftentimes, the technology. Well, I'll say that the sort of the end user of that technology may be the agency itself. Is that correct? So, for example, I see that the Department of Defense, right, is one of the biggest users of technological innovation, and I think a lot of SBIR funding is in support of those technologies that can be utilized by the DoD. Am I in the right? ballpark here when I'm asking this question?
So for some agencies, absolutely. And actually, this is one of the most important things if you're going to look at different agencies to immediately figure out, which is that you're right, at DoD, the best thing you can do to get funded by, say, DoD is to build a product that they want to use. NSF is not going to use your product. We really actually don't have any need for most products because we're a funding agency. All we do is we get money from Congress and we allocate it. So in that sense, we are a pure investor. We don't have to defend the country. Thank God the DoD can do that for us. That's not a mandate we're given. And so even if you had a new body armor, we wouldn't have a need for it. And so because we don't have a need to buy almost any new products or services, we don't have a way to kind of orient our program that way. So again, the way we've oriented it just for us is as an investor of sorts. That's the best way to think about us. We're like an angel investor with weird preferences, right? And not taking an equity stake. But you're right, Henry, that there are a few agencies that do contracts. And when you see an agency that does a contract instead of a grant, you should ask that question when you meet them. Do you do contracts or grants? And if they say they do contracts, that is the definition of we want you to build something that we can use. If they do a grant, it's more like we want you to build something that's more aligned with maybe some vision that you have as a company, or maybe that is kind of a broader, something that serves the nation in a broader way, if that makes sense. But I think, again, like any stakeholder, you talked about ICOR, and I think folks here may have some experience with that. The government is like any other stakeholder. You should figure out early on what makes them tick, like any customer you're doing discovery with. And you'll find that in general, different programs have a very different take as to what the value is. When they think about success, that story will look different depending on the agency. So great, it's a great point to think about what makes the agencies tick, because we are a big, different, diverse government, and what the program looks like here, you should not assume looks like anywhere else, unfortunately.
Got you. Hamide, I believe that's how you pronounce your name. Hopefully I'm not butchering it. But you did ask a question you wanted to circle back. I think that Eric answered your question, but just for the benefit of those that didn't get that, I want to just read it, and then Eric, you can, if you would, just kind of give the response that you had given to her. She wanted to understand that the postdoc co-PI in an STTR project needs to work mainly with the company and cannot receive a stipend from the university, but can receive, I guess, a grant from STTR. But STTR funding is not paid to individuals. So can a postdoc receive from the university, I guess, that funding, and then work on a STTR project? Not quite sure of the full nature of that question, but Eric, you apparently took a stab at it, so
happy to. And again, this is another instance where different government agencies do things a little bit differently. So I'm just going to focus on NSF, in this case. So for SBIR or STTR, the award goes to the company. It doesn't go to an individual, right? So it goes to a company. And then the principal investigator, PI, of the award has to work primarily for the company. Okay, so if we're envisioning a scenario where a postdoc who was affiliated with the university is going to go and be the principal investigator on the STTR award, they would need to be primarily employed by the company, which means, and the NSF uses a work week of 40 hours. So you can't say, oh yeah, they're going to be primarily employed, they're going to work 40 hours for us and 40 hours for someone else. No, 40 hours is the standard work week. So if you cannot work 19.6 or more than 19.6 hours a week for another employer when you're during the full duration of an award where you're the PI there, all right? So in this scenario, you could have someone who was a postdoc in a lab go and join the company, work 51% of their time at the company, be paid a salary, through their company for their time and effort at that work. And they could also still work at university to teach, to do other things at a reduced workload. So like I said, I keep repeating 19.6, but they can't work more than 19.6 hours a week for university in that case. They could still get a stipend through the university. However, it cannot be through the STTR subaward. So the PI cannot be paid as the PI at the company and then be paid as a postdoc from those funds as a subaward from the same award. So it's kind of convoluted, which is why I hope I didn't make anyone too confused. But Ben, if I missed anything, please let me know.
No, I don't think so, but I do. Whether or not you get SBI or STTR, you can take some of the funding, and again, the company is the lead institution here. The company can dedicate some of that funding to a university partner or some other partner in any case. And certainly, if it's a university partner, then a postdoc who happens to be the right person to work on that subaward could participate in that way and stay at the university, and again, not have a relationship with the company. But as Eric mentioned, the goal here is that we want to see where everybody has both feet in some part, and you don't want to be straddling, right? If you're at the company, be at the company. If you're at the university, be at the university. But try not to have one foot on the shore and one foot on the boat, because the boat's leaving, right? So eventually you got to choose. So that's kind of the way we think about it. But certainly, lots and lots of folks. The most common, we have the big success stories. We have the most common story is that someone is at a university in some role, leaves it, starts a company, and they take that company from zero to success. It's not the only way that's done, but it's absolutely something where academics, again, we think about academics as not being good entrepreneurs, or at least some people think that. And honestly, I think it's true it's true, but if you're trying to do both. But folks who are technical people, who are scientists and engineers, who then jump out of academia to be entrepreneurs are fantastic entrepreneurs, as long as they're dedicating themselves fully to that. And so that's kind of because of that, we try to make you choose what camp you want to be in, because we've seen people try to, like, say, be a faculty member and also try to lead a company, and it's a lot. It's a lot to do both. I couldn't do either of those well, and I certainly couldn't do both well at the same time. So we want you to focus if you're going to be part of the companies we fund.
And just to add on that, I had numerous conversations with faculty members who said, but I'm different. I can do both. And even though you may think that, I would rethink it.
Well, actually, this is it really teased me up to ask this question of you both, since both of you were, PhD candidates, and in postdoc, did you pursue your ventures as or contemplate your ventures and ideate around that while you were studying for your PhD, or did you sort of segue from maybe an aha moment that you had while you were a student to your venture that after school?
Ben, I'll let you take this one first.
Okay.
Turn it over to
my venture was spun out of my grad program, and it was myself and my professor and another grad student, and we started kind of informally thinking about it my second to last year before I defended. And I actually took a leave of absence from grad school to be a PI on a phase 1 NSF SBIR for 6 months because of this primarily employment requirement that we talked about. And then when I defended, I took a couple of pictures, I had lunch, and then I went to work for the company that afternoon. So it was kind of an informal portion of the company. And then as soon as I defended, the formal company, the first employee was me. And so that kind of stood up that way. And that's pretty common for our portfolio. But yeah, there was a time that was kind of we were all thinking about it. We didn't have anything set up on paper, but we marinated. We talked to people for a couple of years during the last part of my PhD. And I wish I'd had the aha moment. It was my faculty advisor who had that moment. I was head down as a grad student. I'm sure many of you who are grad students know you're kind of focused down in the weeds. You don't necessarily think, oh, Intel could use this. And I know someone from Intel, so I'll talk to them about it. So yeah, I didn't have the aha moment.
Oops. Is that me?
He had an aha moment.
Yeah, I guess he did. I mentioned there's storms in the area, so he may have lost his internet, but hopefully he'll come back on soon. But I'm happy to give you my story.
Sure.
So my PhD was more not applied. It was molecular cell biology, working with yeast and genetics. Then I got more applied with my postdocs. So I started working in gene therapy and then biomedical engineering, polymer sciences. And it's from that second postdoc that, well, even before that, I was thinking about, or what kind of things may be interesting to start a business. But I didn't have the technology with me at that point. But I had kind of the mindset of looking and feeling out. I was like, because I really was interested in starting a company and potentially working for myself and directing how things were going. And that happened just the second postdoc that I joined. The PI in that lab was also very entrepreneurial minded, and he had some colleagues that were in the business school at the same time. And so we kind of formed a loose company together, entered some business plan challenges, presentation one. Second place 1 year, won first place the second year, and then we leveraged that to get some initial angel funding, and then that was the beginning of it.
Gotcha. We have another question here. Can the company slash PI, I suppose, pay a university contact as a full-time employee?
They could, through a sub-award, pay for someone's salary at the university, but anyone who's going to be a direct cost or direct expense on the primary award needs to be a employee or a contractor. And so they either need to be paid W-2 through the company, or they could be a contractor paid by 1099, which basically is like hourly rate, generally for something like that. So if there is a university employee that you want to pay, they could be paid through a sub-award, same like you would with any funding mechanism through the government, where you get an award. Sometimes there are sub-awards on those, and you can pay salaries or parts of salaries through them. With the caveat, once again, that if that person is an owner of the company, they cannot be paid through a sub-award. However, you can pay postdocs, grad students, even undergrads, as well as faculty members at university, as long as they're not owners of the company. But that would be through a sub-award, not through the primary award of the.
Gotcha. I guess as we're wrapping up here, I wanted to sort of circle back to something that I got the sense of as you were saying that it seems as though this is a, relatively speaking, a fairly lenient kind of process that when you're considering the kinds of technologies that you didn't want to exclude a lot of things, right? You seemed to be pretty inclusive in terms of the possibilities that folks might want to consider as they're pitching their ideas. Tell me and tell us, what are the types of things that have come across your desk that are absolutely no-nos, right? Ones that aren't going to see the light of day and won't make it to the full proposal route.
As far as a project pitch?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. The most common thing that I see is people say, I've developed this product, I need more funding to grow my business. Because that's not really addressing that technical risk and the technical R&D. And I understand that companies do need that at a certain time. This program just isn't the right one for that. So there needs to be that technical development still. Also needs to be based on science or engineering, and science is broad. I mean, there's social sciences, there's behavioral sciences, there's as well as things like physics and biology and that kind of thing. Sometimes we will ask for clarification on things during the project pitch stage, where not it's unclear where this fits, and so I might probe a little bit. It's like, oh, hey, I know there's 10 different products in this space. What's new and differentiating for yours? What's interesting? And that's not a reason to decline a pitch by any means, but it's just me getting some more clarification, because the point of the pitch process is to help the PIs, because it takes a lot of work to put together a proposal. And if it's not going to be a great fit for the program, you should know soon. So the pitch is an opportunity to do that. And some of that is the state of technology development, and some of it is, there's not really a market opportunity. And I won't turn you down necessarily because of that, but I will come back and say, how are you protecting what you're doing? Who are the competitors? What's your competitive advantage? You might want to think about that a little bit more before you come back for that. As I mentioned, the pitch is not a review of your technology, of your proposal. It's really about fit for the program. And so the main thing we were looking at that stage is, your stage of development. What's your innovation, and how is that risky? And so, again, the other no-nos I see are people who write 1 or 2 lines in each of the text boxes, and it's like, oh, that this could cure hunger throughout the world. I'm changing this plant so it's going to be more nutritious, but don't give any details on how it's happening.
Right.
And that was another no I would say for the pitches.
Gotcha. So I'm going to throw it out to for last questions as we wrap this up, and then there's something that I wanted to share with everyone as it relates to SBIR and SSRT, STTR, excuse me, grants. This was a part of a report that was submitted to Congress. But are there any other questions before we wrap it up from our attendees? Oh, okay. All right, and we're doing this live streaming, so there's nothing from YouTube as well. Let me just share something here that I came across, and hopefully everyone will get a chance to see this. This is from a report, as I mentioned, that was presented to Congress about SBIR and SBIR in particular, right? And to some extent or another, and to a lesser degree, STTR. But as you can see, in fiscal year 2019, women-owned small businesses received 11% of all Phase 1 SBIR awards, totaling $86.3 million, and 12% of Phase 1 funding, okay? And then also, they received 10% of Phase 2 funding, which, as Eric said, is a larger amount, right? Totaling $289.3 million, right? Which is about 12% of the overall funding. Now, socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, and that would include those that are led by minority founders, they received 8% of Phase 1 SBIR awards, totaling 49.4%, or 7% of Phase 1 funding, and only 6% of Phase 2 funding, totaling $117 million, or 5%, right? So the reason that I'm sharing this, and the reason that I'm bringing this up, is because there is a tremendous opportunity, I believe, to get more women and minority-owned businesses involved in this process. It's the reason that we wanted to introduce it to you this evening. We want, and I think that if I'm not mistaken, Eric and Ben, the SBA has made a concerted effort, an intentional effort, to get more folk that have otherwise not been a part of the process involved in the process, right? So, sort of in closing, I don't know if there's anything that you can say to speak to that. I know you started off our session here with some examples of businesses that were led by African Americans and also were particularly diverse. in their amongst their founders. So I don't know if you could speak to this at all, as we wrap this up, but be curious to know what your thoughts are about this.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem throughout the investment community where you see women-owned companies and minority-owned companies get less funding from VCs at lower valuations. It's pervasive throughout the community, and obviously SBA and the different government agencies are making efforts to reach out to different communities that haven't maybe been familiar, with the programs. We have some initiatives which are ongoing to try to bring more reviewers in from diverse communities, as well as get more applicants in from diverse communities. Try to figure out why members of different communities aren't applying, to the program in general. And that's one of the major issues. I think it's something which is, systematic in many ways, where NSF is science and engineering, and that we want to build up STEM, diverse STEM education, diverse STEM workforce at all levels, from K through 12, community college, universities, all the way up through the workforce. And we're making efforts to try to broaden that applicant pool, as well as bring in reviewers. So if anyone is interested, potentially in learning more about the SBIR program from the inside and being a reviewer, we want diverse perspectives in the reviewer pool as well. And so there are different ways that you can engage with the community, the SBIR communities, in order to hopefully have a positive impact to increase the representation, with the program.
Great, thank you. So I think that's about it. What I'd like to do before we head off is that there's another little poll that I like to have everyone participate in. Those of you who are attendees, and I'm gonna launch this now. And we definitely want to thank both Eric and Ben for their presentation, their facilitation of this workshop this evening. We also want to thank our sponsor, NCI IDEA, based here in North Carolina. By the way, North Carolina happens to be one of the leading states in receiving SBIR and STTR funding. So, I think that there's, we've got a little tailwind that we could probably utilize for those of you who are here in the state to our advantage. So again, want to thank you all for participating, and again to our presenters for their insights, and someone said go Blue Devils, right? For their insights, for their knowledge, and for sharing this vital information. And have a good evening, everyone, and thanks again. Keep an eye out for our next workshop, which will be coming up probably in September. So we will keep you posted. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.